Join Garage Woodworks League and build a through tenon bookcase and your woodworking skills. There are three main types of stones for sharpening your tools. There are diamond stones, oil stones, and water stones. Now, the type of stone that I prefer to use are water stones. And the reason for that is that they cut really quickly. They remove a lot of metal fast, and you don't have to spend a lot of time sharpening your tools. And with proper maintenance, what's also nice about them is that the 1,000th time that you use your water stone, it's gonna work just as nicely as if it were the first time you used it. I use three different types of stones. I use a 1,000 grit, a 4,000 grit, and an 8,000 grit water stone. And I keep them constantly submerged in water in this plastic container that has a nice lid. That way the water stones are always wet and they're always ready to go. One drawback to using water stones is that they occasionally need to be flattened. That's because as you're sharpening your chisels or plane irons, you're removing some of the stone material in the process, and the stone can start to get dished a little bit. So you need to just occasionally flatten them. And I'm going to show you my process for flattening water stones, and it's incredibly easy and it doesn't take a lot of time and you don't have to spend a lot of money. One thing that you will need in order to use this method for flattening your water stones is a nice flat reference surface. Now I like to use a granite surface plate that I purchased, and I know this guy is dead flat. And I also use this granite surface plate for a bunch of other things in the shop, like setting up dial indicator jigs. And if you don't have a granite surface plate in your shop, I highly recommend you get one. They're not very expensive. And it's just a nice thing to have in your shop, a nice reference for flat. Most people will have dozens of references for 90 degrees, different squares, but they won't have a reference for flat. Aside from your granite surface plate, you're also going to need a sheet of 150 grit sandpaper. Now, I've also tried 220 grit, and I find that the 150 stands up a little bit better, and it just works better than 220. Now, this paper is by Norton, and you can, if you want, use a wet dry sandpaper, but this sandpaper happens to hold up really well with water, but it doesn't say wet dry on the box, but it does hold up really well to water. So the next thing I do is just take some spray adhesive and I just give my granite surface plate a few spritzes. And then just take your sandpaper and lay it down flat on the granite surface plate. There you go. Now just take a water bottle and just spritz down the surface of the sandpaper. I'm gonna start with my 1,000 grit stone. So I'm just going to take a pencil and I'm going to make marks all the way across the stone so I can watch my progress as I'm flattening it. Now with just light pressure, make circular motions with the stone on top of the sandpaper. And I like to use the entire surface of the sandpaper. There we go. Most of the pencil is removed except for this portion over here, so I'll keep going. There we go. That looks pretty good. And now all I have to do is the opposite side, and then I can move on to my next stone. This is my 4,000 grit stone, and it has a little bit more wear than the 1,000 grit, so this one might take a little bit more time. Let's see. Now I'm not going to remove the slurry from the previous stone. I'm just going to continue flattening the 4,000 grit stone. During the process of flattening, if your sandpaper easily falls apart, try using a wet dry sandpaper. Now there we go. All of the pencil markers are removed. Now I know this stone is completely flat, and it really didn't take that long at all. Now I just need to do the opposite face and I can move on to my final stone. Now when you're doing this process, you want to try to not move the stone over any exposed portions of your granite surface plate. Now because the sandpaper has some thickness to it, the stone shouldn't make contact with your granite surface plate, even if you do go over the exposed region. A badly worn 8,000 grit stone. Good as new. So there you go, I flattened both faces of all three of my water stones using the same piece of 150 grit sandpaper, and it really didn't take that long at all. Now, I will say that if you don't do this process very often and you let your water stones get really out of whack and really dished out from use, this process can take a lot longer when you finally get to it. Now, if you stay on top of it, the process is really quick. It's just like sharpening chisels and plane irons. If you put it off, and then when you finally get to sharpening your chisels, it's going to take longer to get a nice sharp edge. So it's the same with this. When I first started using water stones, I bought one of those flattening stones where you take the flattening stone and you just rub it against the water stone in order to flatten it. Now those work for a while, I found, but what starts to happen to the flattening stone is that with repetitive use, the flattening stone will either start to get convex or concave, so that's no longer flat. And the opposite will happen to your water stone that you're trying to flatten. It will either get convex or concave to match the shape of the flattening stone, which is no longer flat. Now, I have read that you can take the flattening stone and flatten it on sandpaper adhered to a flat surface and to get it flat again and then go back to using it on your water stones. But why not just cut out the middleman with the flattening stone and then just go straight to sandpaper on a flat surface? I've been using this method for a long time and it seems to work really well. So that's all I've got for you guys today. If you get a chance, please check out the all-new Garage Woodworks League, where I am starting to publish project videos that are a lot longer and more detailed than my usual YouTube videos. And you'll find a link to the Garage Woodworks League in the video description below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.